He came home 3 hours early, and that was the thing that changed everything. Nathan Gould had been sitting in the back of a car somewhere on the interstate, heading back from a conference in Chicago that had ended a day ahead of schedule, thinking about nothing in particular. The skyline fading behind him, the flat gray of the highway, whether Eleanor had remembered to call the plumber about the second-floor bathroom, when his phone buzzed, a text from his assistant. "Safe travels, Mr. Gould. See you Thursday." He read it twice before realizing it was only Wednesday. He told the driver not to bother with the hotel. Just take him home. The Gould estate sat at the end of a long private road lined with oak trees that his grandfather had planted in 1958. And Nathan had grown up thinking of that road as the border between the rest of the world and something quieter. Something his. He still felt it even now. That small exhale when the iron gate swung open, the way the house appeared through the trees like something inevitable. He had brought his wife here on their third date, stood beside her at the top of the front steps and watched her face for a reaction, and she had looked at it for a long moment and said, "It's beautiful, Nathan, but it's very large for two people." She had been right. It was always too large for two people. That was the problem he had never quite let himself admit. He heard it before he even reached the front door. His mother's voice. Nora Gould, 71 years old, built like a woman who had never once been told no, carrying through the tall windows of the sitting room with a clarity that made his stomach drop. Not the content at first, just the tone. He knew that tone. He had grown up inside it. "You think this is your house? You think any of this belongs to you?" Nathan stood on the porch steps with his bag still in his hand. "I have been patient with you because my son asked me to be. But I want you to understand something, Miriam. When that baby comes, and I will be there for every moment of it, things are going to change. My grandchild will be raised properly, not by you." He opened the door. The sitting room was to the left of the foyer, through a pair of French doors that were standing slightly open. He could see the edge of his mother's silk blouse, the rigid line of her shoulders. And then, as he stepped forward, he could see his wife, Miriam Gould. Miriam Holt, before she married him 14 months ago, was standing near the window with her arms wrapped around herself, one hand resting on the curve of her stomach. She was 7 months along. She was wearing a pale blue dress that he had bought her in September, and she was very still, the way she went still when she was trying not to let anything show. She was looking at his mother the way a person looks at a storm they cannot get out of. She hadn't seen him yet. "You came from nothing," his mother said, "and nothing is what you have contributed to this family. You have given him one good thing, and that child deserves better than a mother who doesn't even know which fork to use at the dinner table." Nora. His own voice surprised him. It came out low and steady in a way he did not feel. "That is enough." His mother turned. For a fraction of a second, something moved across her face. Not guilt exactly, but the recognition that she had been caught at something. Then it arranged itself back into its usual expression of complete composure. "Nathan, you're home early." "Yes," he said, "I am." He looked at Miriam. She had turned toward him when he spoke, and now she was watching him with an expression he could not entirely read. Not relief, not quite. Something more careful than that, like a person who had learned not to assume things would go their way. "Go upstairs," he said quietly. "Please, I'll be up in a few minutes." She hesitated. Then she nodded and walked past him without a word, her shoulder brushing his arm as she went. He felt the warmth of it. He stood there until he heard her footsteps reach the landing. Then he turned to Monsieur. He did not go upstairs in a few minutes. He was in the sitting room with Nora Gould for nearly an hour, and it was not a clean conversation. It never was with her. She was not a woman who collapsed under confrontation. She redirected it, questioned it, turned it back on the person doing the confronting with a precision that Nathan had spent most of his adult life admiring, and the last 14 months learning to be frightened of. She said that he had misheard. She said that Miriam was sensitive. She said that this was her home, had been her home for 40 years, and that she had every right to maintain certain standards within it. She said that she was thinking of the child. She was standing there holding her stomach, he said. "She always does that. It's for effect." She was trying not to cry. "Nathan," his mother set her glass down on the side table, "I know this woman has made you feel things you haven't felt before. I understand the appeal. But you are a Gould, this company, this house, everything your father built. It does not belong to someone like Miriam. She came from nowhere. Her mother was a bookkeeper in a strip mall in Ohio. Her mother," Nathan said, "worked for 40 years and raised a daughter alone and never complained about it once. That is more than most people manage." His mother looked at him with something close to pity. "You'll understand eventually," she said. "You always come around." He left the room before he said something he couldn't take back. Upstairs, Miriam was sitting on the edge of the bed with the lamp on, not reading, the book open in her lap. She looked up when he came in, and he sat down beside her and didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at the pattern in the rug and tried to figure out where to start. "How long?" he asked finally. She was quiet. "Miriam, how long has she been doing that?" "Since the beginning," she said. Her voice was very even. "Since before the wedding." He felt something cold move through him. "And you didn't tell me?" "I tried once. In the spring. You said she was adjusting. You said she had lost your father recently, and that she wasn't herself. She paused. You weren't wrong exactly. She wasn't herself, but she was also exactly herself. Both things can be true. He didn't have an answer for that. I didn't want you to have to choose, she said. I thought I could manage it. I thought if I was patient enough, if I was careful enough, if I just didn't. She stopped, pressed her lips together. She told me last week that she had already spoken to a family attorney about the baby's custody arrangements, in case things didn't work out between us. Nathan stared at her. She's what? She said it very calmly. Over breakfast while you were in New York. Miriam looked down at her hands. She said she wanted me to understand what my options were. He stood up. He walked to the window and back. He had known his mother was difficult. He had known she disapproved of Miriam. Had known it from the first dinner, from the way Nora had smiled too precisely, and asked Miriam too many questions about her background. He had told himself it was grief. He had told himself it was transition. He had told himself a great many things that turned out to be excuses for not looking directly at what was happening in his own house. I'm sorry, he said. It came out smaller than he meant it to. Miriam nodded, not in acceptance exactly. More like acknowledgement. What do you want to do? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment. I want to stay. I love this house, Nathan. I love you. But I cannot keep living like this, and I think you've known that for longer than you've been willing to admit. He sat back down beside her. You're right, he said. I have. The next morning, he came down early and found his mother already at the breakfast table, reading the paper in the way she had done every morning of his childhood. Perfectly straight-backed, coffee untouched until it cooled to exactly the temperature she preferred. She looked up when he came in. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to listen to it. Of course, I want you to move into the guest house by the end of the week. She set the paper down slowly. I beg your pardon, the cottage on the south end of the property. It's been updated. You'll have everything you need. You can come to the main house for dinner when we invite you. He kept his voice level. But you cannot continue to live under the same roof as Miriam. I should have done this a long time ago, and I didn't, and that is something I have to live with, but I'm doing it now. Nora Gould looked at her son the way she had looked at him when he was 12 years old and had broken a window and tried to blame it on the neighbor's kid. Like she was waiting for him to crack. This is her doing, she said. No, this is mine. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Mom, I have looked away from things I shouldn't have. I've let you say things to her that I never should have allowed. She's been managing it alone because she was trying to protect me from having to choose, and she was wrong to do that, and I was wrong to let her. He folded his hands on the table. She's having my child in 8 weeks. I'm asking you to make this easier. Just to give them space. His mother was very still. Your father, she started. Dad has been gone for 3 years, Nathan said quietly. I know you miss him, I do too, but that's not what this is about. She picked up her coffee cup, set it down again without drinking. I'll need until Sunday, she said. Sunday is fine, he said. He thought that was the end of it. He was wrong. 3 days later, Miriam came to find him in his study with a look on her face that he had not seen before. Not the careful stillness of someone holding something in, but something opened up like a door that had been shut a long time. She was holding a folder. I found something, she said. I wasn't looking for it. I was going through the boxes in the east storage room. The ones from when your father's office was cleared out. Because I wanted to find the photos from the company's first anniversary. Your father had told me about them once before he died. Said there were pictures from the original building. She set the folder on his desk. Nathan, my mother worked here. He looked up. Not as what I thought. Miriam's voice was steady but her hands were not quite. She told me she had done some accounting work for a company in Connecticut when I was small. I never knew the name of it. She died when I was 19, and there were things we never got to talk about properly. She touched the edge of the folder. She was a co-founder, Fithin. Your father and my mother started this company together, in 1987. There are contracts in here, partnership agreements. Her name is on everything. He opened the folder. The documents were old real paper, typed on a machine with signatures at the bottom that had faded at the edges but were still legible. James Gould on the right, and on the left, in handwriting he didn't recognize, Ann Holt. Ann Holt, Miriam's mother. She had a 30% stake, Miriam said. And then in 1992, 5 years later, there's a document here that transfers her shares. But the signature doesn't look right, Nathan. Look at it. He looked at it. The signature on the transfer document was flat, mechanical, unlike the fluid cursive on everything else Ann Holt had signed. It looked like someone had traced it. He sat back in his chair. My mother, he said. Miriam didn't say anything. He went through the folder 3 times. There were letters too. Correspondence between his father and Ann Holt from the early years. Professional and careful, and then warmer as time went on. Nothing inappropriate. Just 2 people who were building something together and had come to trust each other. And then, abruptly, in 1992, the letters stopped. The same year as the transfer document. He thought about his mother's voice in the sitting room. Her mother was a bookkeeper in a strip mall in Ohio. Said with such certainty, such contempt. She had known exactly who Miriam's mother was. She had known from the very beginning. She blocked the partnership, he said. She erased her. And then I walked through the front door, Miriam said, and she recognized my last name. Or she recognized something. And she spent the next 14 months trying to push me back out. Nathan stood up from his desk and walked to the window. Outside, the oak trees his grandfather had planted were standing in the October wind, steady and indifferent the way old things are. He had spent his whole life trusting his mother's version of events, not because he was naive, or not only because of that, but because it was easier to trust the story you were handed than to go looking for the one underneath it. His father had been a good man, he knew that, but his father had also been a man who made compromises, who deferred to his wife in the ways that kept the peace, and somewhere in that deference a woman's life's work had been quietly signed away. He turned around. I need to call the company attorney, he said, and I think you should call someone too, your own counsel, not ours. Someone who represents only you. She looked at him steadily. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that your mother helped build this company. That what happened to her stake was not legitimate, and that I intend to find out exactly what my mother did and make sure it's corrected. He paused. Whatever that looks like. For the first time in a long time something in Miriam's face relaxed. Not all the way, but enough that he could see it. Okay, she said. He went to the guest house himself. It was a Thursday evening, cold, the light going early. Nora Gould answered the door in a cashmere cardigan and reading glasses, and she looked at his face and seemed to understand immediately that this was not a social visit. She let him in. She sat down in the armchair by the window. She did not offer him tea. He set the folder on the table between them. She looked at it for a long moment without touching it. I was 29, she said finally, when your father met her. He waited. She was brilliant, I'll give her that. She had ideas. Your father was always drawn to people with ideas. His mother took off her glasses and folded them in her lap. They worked together for 4 years, and I watched my husband come home from that office talking about Ann this and Ann that, and I thought. She stopped. It doesn't matter what I thought, it matters, Nathan said. I thought he was in love with her. Her voice was flat. He wasn't, but I was 29, and I was frightened, and I had a 4-year-old at home, and I did what I did. She looked at the folder. I had a notary who owed me a favor. It wasn't complicated. Mom? She was paid, Nora said quickly, as if this redeemed something. Not what she was owed, but she was paid. She signed a non-disclosure. She moved to Ohio. A pause. I didn't know she had a daughter. She had a daughter, Nathan said. She raised her alone, and that daughter grew up not knowing her mother had built something real because you took it from her. His mother said nothing. And then that daughter married your son, he said. And you spent 14 months trying to destroy her before she could find out. Nora Gould sat in her armchair in the fading October light, and she looked very old and very tired. And Nathan felt a grief for her that he didn't want to feel but couldn't stop. She was his mother. She had been afraid. That did not make what she had done forgivable, but it made it human. And humanity was the thing he was least prepared to deal with right now. What happens next? She asked. The attorneys will determine what Ann Holt's stake was worth and what restitution looks like. That's between them and the estate. He stood. You'll need to give a statement, the whole thing. He picked up the folder. And you're going to have to find a way to say something true to Miriam. I don't know what that looks like, and I'm not going to script it for you. But it needs to happen. He left her sitting by the window. The weeks that followed were not simple. Nothing about it was clean or fast. The attorneys found more documents. There were always more documents, Nathan was learning. When someone had spent 30 years trying to make a thing disappear, Miriam hired a lawyer out of Boston, a woman named Carol who had the particular gift of being entirely unmoved by the Gould family name, and the process of what Carol called rectifying the foundational inequity took most of the fall. Nora Gould gave her statement. She did not minimize it in the end. Nathan had expected her to, had braced for another round of redirections and justifications, but his mother surprised him. She sat across the table from Carol and a court-appointed mediator and said in her clear and level voice, exactly what she had done. She said she had been afraid. She said she had made a choice she could not undo. She said that she was sorry. It was not a dramatic moment, it was a quiet one. But Nathan saw Miriam's hand tighten once in her lap, and he reached over and covered it with his, and she let him. The financial restitution was significant. A portion of the company, restructured now to reflect what should have been Ann Holt's stake, passed to her only heir, came to Miriam. It was more money than she had ever thought to want, and she sat with it for several days before she said anything about it. When she finally spoke, she said she wanted to establish a fund in her mother's name for women starting businesses without capital. Nathan thought that sounded exactly right. His mother remained in the guest house. She came to the main house on Sundays for dinner, and the meals were careful and sometimes strained, but they happened. Miriam had said she did not want to excise Nora from their lives. She's going to be this child's grandmother, she said, and I am not going to be the person who decides they don't deserve each other. Nathan thought this was more generous than he deserved and told her so. Don't make me into a saint, she said. I'm still angry. I'll probably be angry for a long time. I just don't want to live inside it. The baby was born on a Tuesday morning in early December, in the room down the hall from where Nathan had slept his whole childhood. Because Miriam had decided she wanted to be home and her doctors had agreed, and Nathan had spent 3 weeks making sure every possible contingency was covered. In the way he handled everything, he was frightened of losing a girl. They named her Frances Ann Gould. Frances for Nathan's grandmother, Ann for Miriam's mother. Nathan held her in the delivery room for the first time and felt something rearrange itself in him that he suspected was permanent. She was very small and very loud and entirely unimpressed with the Gould family name, which seemed correct. Miriam watched him from the bed, still tired, her hair damp, more beautiful than he had words for. She has your ears, Miriam said. She has your determination, he said. I can already tell. Miriam laughed. A real laugh. The one that came from somewhere unguarded. And Nathan thought of all the months he had let pass without protecting her. All the mornings she had stood in the kitchen managing his mother's contempt with a grace he hadn't earned. All the conversations they should have had sooner. He thought of Ann Holt, who had built something real, and watched it disappear and moved to Ohio, and raised a daughter who grew up not knowing her own inheritance. The daughter knew now. He looked down at the small indignant face of his daughter, and he made the kind of promise you make silently, to no one but yourself, in the particular silence of very early morning. He was going to be the kind of man who looked directly at things. Starting now, outside the window, the December light came up slow and cold over the oak trees, steady as anything his grandfather had planted and left behind. Things that endure not because they are protected from weather, but because their roots go deep enough to hold.